Okay.
What are they asking you to do?
They're asking to put your name on here so that
Oh, okay.
and your title. What should I put as your title?
Got it.
What do you want as your title?
What, like my job?
Yeah. Or whatever you
Um,
want, doesn't matter.
you can just call me a freelance writer.
Okay. That's so whack. I thought you'd be more I thought you would want to put something
Oh, you
more
want something stupid?
all right, whatever. It doesn't matter. That's your
Oh, yours
title.
says provocateur gamer. Okay, I just got the video. Um, you can just put me as a very smart poster. That's fine.
I mean, I can't lie on this stream, but communist
Okay.
Twitter is what people are
No,
saying.
please don't put the word Twitter. Just put. You can just put communist.
Okay, I
That's
like
fine.
that. That's okay. That's better. Hope. Wow, we are. I'm just like. I'm just doing the most right now. I'm like changing people's titles and shit in real time. Hopefully, it doesn't fucking completely tank my slobs because usually it destroys the entire stream anytime you make any sort of minor differences or anything like that. All right, Steelers fan already disagree. All right, everybody, calm
Yeah.
down.
Sorry, folks.
Do you have a terrible towel behind you?
I do.
Oh my
Yeah.
god, disgusting. You like sports? The fuck?
Uh, I don't care much about sports, but I'm from Pittsburgh, and every time I try to, like, whenever I move, I get rid of the terrible towel, and then my mom sends me a new one when she figures it out. So I've given up, and I just have it up. So,
I'm offended. Like
sorry.
all of the nice things I said about you before you got on the stream about how you're
No.
like a brilliant writer.
What'd you say?
I
Oh,
said you're
thanks.
great. I said as a communist, if you're getting repped by Forbes, you must be doing something right. And
Yeah,
that's what my perspective was, and I think that's true.
yeah,
You
thanks.
know. But that was precisely what I wanted to talk to you about today. Today's Labor Day. Obviously, it's a little different here in America than anywhere else. We celebrate Labor Day in September for some weird reason. I don't know why. I grew up in Turkey where we have May Day, and
Hmm.
that's when the workers get pepper sprayed and water cannoned when they're protesting in Turkey at
Well,
least.
I mean, we do also have May Day here, but yes, Labor Day itself was a product of, some of it was working class struggle brought it into being. And then the president at the time, Grover Cleveland, declared Labor Day kind of this alternative to May Day, as a way to sort of co opt that power. It was in the wake of a huge strike, that led Eugene Debs to end up in prison, killed 30 workers. So it was a way to sort of tamp down on that militancy. So now we have this bullshit version, and then we still have May Day, for now.
Okay.
So there's your
Yeah.
history lesson.
Well, no, that's why I need you here to give us the cold hard facts about Labor Day because a lot of people, of course, think they only know Labor Day as a time when people get together and party, and
Mm-hmm.
also as a time when you're not allowed to wear white anymore after that particular day, which I think was a bourgeoisie interference on that, right? Isn't that like something that they came up with after, like way after Labor Day?
I have no idea where the you can't wear white after Labor Day thing comes from. Yeah, you
I
can
do.
find uh, good weird history of that, but I don't know.
Wow. Turns out I'm the one who's about to teach you some stuff about Labor Day.
Yeah, please tell me the
Okay.
fashion angle,
So
on this.
so the three hypotheses about the origin of no white after Labor Day, there's three different theories. The first one is disagreed upon by many, but is based on class distinction in the early 1900s. Although white clothing was clearly an upper class luxury, after the Civil War it became harder to distinguish women coming from old money or new money. So the old oligarchs or aristocrats were upset that the nouveau riche were also among their ranks wearing white clothing, which is like hard to clean and stuff and keep white. So the higher class ladies then made an inane fashion rule to weed out those who were out of place. So that's the one
What are
theory.
you reading from right now?
I'm just this is Town and Country magazine.
Okay.
And then
Right.
the
That makes
second
sense.
theory is a more practical approach, which is that Memorial Day and Labor Day bracketed the summer season, and therefore you can't wear like lighter, summery white clothes anymore. They're no longer needed after summer. So that's the second theory. And then the last theory is that popular fashion magazines, who may have begun promoting fall clothing after Labor Day, decided to cap that. And this is like after in modern times when in memetics we say like I can't wait till winter so I can really start dressing. That's where that comes from. I don't know if you guys
Yeah.
are familiar with that. Everyone in the
So it's a
chat and also
branding
you,
exercise.
Alex.
Got it.
Anyway, so but give us the real reason. I mean you briefly mentioned it, but then obviously like the whole. I mean I don't want to interfere in any way, but my understanding is also that it's the 8-hour work week, and Saturdays are for the boys were also additional things that unions fought for, right?
Sure. So, I mean, that
I mean,
history is not just about Labor Day, but certainly, yeah, the reason we have weekends, the reason we have restrictions on hours worked each week and overtime pay, and the reason that you can't work in whatever kind of work as a kid in this country, all are thanks to militant labor unions, not even the type of labor unions we have today, but like, people going up, putting their body on the line to ensure that people like you and me, everybody in this country now, has certain benefits. So everybody should use this holiday as an excuse to think about it. And, I'm a kind of unending proponent of people, organizing their workplaces or supporting workers who are on strike. A bunch of teachers are going on strike soon, probably in your city, Hassan. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, tell me more about what kind. Well, first of all, let me just say that you're wrong. As a gamer, I never take any days off, so that's one. My struggle
Hey,
continues.
we're both on this stream right now.
Okay.
But I got a fucking draft to write after this. None of us get days off.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying. You're over there. You're just you're working for the corporate class. Technically, by trying to I mean, you've intercepted the corporate class by writing about labor and whatnot. But I, a true gamer, am performing the only kind of ethical consumption under late stage capitalism, which is buying Fortnite skins, and also never stopping gaming or posting. As a matter of fact, which the two are completely closely intertwined with one another. I just wanted to put that out there. But everyone else, like coal miners and stuff, the guys that do the easy work, they can take potentially 3 days off. I can't. But having said that, can you tell me a little bit about what's going on in LA, the strike?
Yeah, so the LA teachers, I can't remember what day it was, but they did sometime last week, they took a strike authorization vote. So what that is also, by the way, can you hear me? I don't have the headphones on. Can you
Yeah,
hear
we
me
can
fine?
perfectly hear you. Everyone can hear
Okay.
you. Why did
Right.
you we've been talking for 15 minutes. Did you, are you
I
now
just
worried that
remembered
you
I
might not be
had
heard?
well, I figured you could hear me, but I didn't know if the quality was fine.
No, the quality's great. Spectacular.
I mean, I could have my gamer headphones on, but I'm not trying to look like that.
There's nothing that grinds our gears here at the Hasanabi Twitch stream than people who steal valor. Not the military, the gamers I'm referring to, of course. If you steal gamer valor, then I don't know. I mean, you have to at least tell us what your favorite game or anime is or something.
Okay, so I am not gonna do that. You can just kick me off the stream. Okay, so the LA teachers. So last week they voted to authorize a strike. 98% of the people who voted for that. And when you authorize a strike vote, that means that you aren't necessarily going on strike. But should your contract negotiations break down, the leadership of the union is authorized to say, fuck it, we're going on strike. And so that happened, and they have this overwhelming mandate. I mean, 98% is a really high percent for a teachers union that really hasn't gone on strike in a long time. So, what will happen remains to be seen, but I think it's exactly a month from now that they've said if the contract isn't agreed to by then they'll take the entire LA public school system out on strike. So it's an exciting time. That would be a huge deal.
Are you familiar? Do you know what their demands are? Or this isn't even technically a strike yet, so we don't know what they might request if they ever were to. This is just to reserve the right?
Well, we do know what their, priorities are. We don't know what the sort of bottom line, whether they would go out on strike or not, kind of key demand is, but journalists have already been sort of writing about this. Teachers have been speaking, as well as the union reps have been speaking about what the key demands are. So LA teachers across the board seem to be saying it's not that their wages are too low. They're concerned with their class sizes are huge. So I think it's 43 students to a teacher is the limit, which is like an absolutely insane number of students to have in a room. So that's a key one. They're worried about charter schools, which I'm sure you're well aware, tend to funnel money without any kind of transparency on what their standards are, any kind of results. There's widespread, kind of discrimination that happens within charter schools that's really well documented. So they're demanding more transparency from charter schools, the class sizes thing. I'm trying to remember what the other ones, that I've seen be said, but what's important is these are sort of, for someone, I've written a lot about the labor movement and the general public, and, strikes are a really risky thing, right? Especially in a school, because you have the potential to turn your entire community against you. I mean, you have working class parents who now have to find childcare or they have to stay home. So it's a really touchy subject.
And also food, right? That's a big problem too. When you
right.
if you're a low income family, like you are completely reliant on the food providing one meal or sometimes two meals for your children. So when you go on strike, essentially,
right.
That's like one of the big things that I remember from like Oklahoma and West Virginia is that teachers were also pooling funds together so that they could provide meals for the families of the children that were being affected by their strike.
Yeah, and my sense from, people who are on the organizing committee at the LA Teachers Union is that they're already sort of putting those things in motion to prepare, even if, just in case they go out on strike, you really want to have that all settled so you're not turning anyone against you unnecessarily. The reason I was saying there was tension in teachers going out on strike is, that tension is sort of helped if some of their demands clearly benefit the families who, enroll their kids in the schools. So the fact that every teacher is saying this is not about wages, that even if the contract negotiation, even if the school system gets the demands around wages, every teacher interviewed, at least in kind of the best reporting on this stuff that's happened in the past week, every teacher has said they would still strike because they're striking for better schools with smaller classrooms, better funding. All of that is really promising, and it's exactly what happened in West Virginia and in all these states that really saw this widespread public support. So it's a promising kind of setup that's happening. That said, Seattle teachers also were poised to go on strike. They'd overwhelmingly authorized a vote, and they just, I think today or last night, came to an agreement and called off the strike. So with strikes, you never know until the last minute if it's really going to happen. But sort of the eyes of anybody who writes about labor, works in a union, is part of the labor movement, everybody's looking to see what's going to happen in LA. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and LA, you mentioned this already. Like one of the big problems in Los Angeles are charter schools, but in Los Angeles, in comparison to other parts of the country, the public school system, while already severely underfunded in comparison to other nations, is still a lot better than like Oklahoma per se, right? Especially when it comes to funds and whatnot. The reason why I mentioned Oklahoma again, and you and I have talked about this before, is my understanding is that there were 6 Oklahoma legislators who opposed the teacher pay raise. They were voted out of office in the primary runoffs recently, and I feel like that's still an ongoing effort in Oklahoma and other places around the country where we kind of cover this sort of stuff. You obviously focus on it more even after it's no longer in the headlines and it's no longer being covered. But What would you say about the success rate, or at least like about the successes of these wildcat strikes all around the country overall, 3, 4, 5 months down the line, while we're no longer talking about it?
Well, I'd say they're certainly still ongoing. I'm, personally most connected to the people in West Virginia, who are just like incredible, radical, great organizers. And so the organizing doesn't stop, right? You and I both know how media works. Maybe if certainly within the labor movement, you're lucky to get any media coverage in the United States. So we saw the teacher strikes get that coverage because a strike, especially in a state where a strike is illegal, is such a huge deal. But yeah, you're right that within 2 weeks, there were no headlines anymore. So what's been going on since is, in Oklahoma, as you mentioned, a lot of this stuff has been translated in part into electoral organizing. Um, it's not just happening in Oklahoma, though it's certainly, there was I think a good New York Magazine story that covered the success of that. In West Virginia, there's this guy, Richard Ojeda. Do you know him?
Is he? No, I don't know. Is he one of the organizers?
No, he is actually a politician he's a maniac. I'll tell a story, but he sort of became this champion of the teacher strike immediately as soon as the strike started, and has continued to be very much in conversation and in the same room as these teachers who led the strike. And he is poised to quite possibly, have real electoral successes. In other states, there are similar kind of efforts about this affecting the midterms. But I think maybe but certainly people on the stream don't know. I truly don't write about electoral politics, and in part that's because sometimes you can see how efforts continue into the electoral realm, but rarely does anyone ever talk about how this looks on the ground beyond that. And so I think what's really interesting is that in every state where this has happened, whether they've had huge success with their strike or they're still fighting in certain ways, the efforts on the ground to organize haven't stopped at all, despite summer break. And so these teachers are still agitating around healthcare demands that they didn't get. They're agitating for other workers now to get bigger raises, stuff like that. So that is still ongoing.
Yeah. Um, Hold on. There's like weird background noise coming from somewhere, but okay.
Really
There.
from me.
What?
It's
Oh,
my apartment is on a loud street.
oh, it is. Oh, okay. Um,
Yeah, a little bit.
what else was I gonna ask you? There's so much that I mean. Well, first of all, before now that we're talking about the teachers union already, I wanted to take a step back for a second and potentially talk about how the police force factors into all of this, because it's something that I tweeted out earlier that a lot of people were very upset at me about. I don't know if you want to talk about it at all, but like the creation of the police force as a whole and how that works alongside the labor momentum as an effort to squash any form of collective action and protect capital at all costs. And I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, or if that's something
Sure.
that you're
Yeah.
interested in.
Yeah. I love to hate the police, so I will explain why there are good reasons for that. So I don't know what you tweeted, but I mean the
It was
history of
bad.
it was bad. What was it?
No, it wasn't. I'm just saying that because you always make fun of my tweets. No, it was just.
Oh, right. That's why I didn't read it because you're muted. Duh.
Oh wow, that's terrible. That's wow. No one on the chat do that. Also, no one follow Alex on Twitter at AlexNPress. She's
Wow.
only makes bad tweets. No, I just said Happy Labor Day. The police force was created to protect capital and destroy collective action of workers. And
Mhm.
immediately, of course, everyone was like, you're brown, Fabio, you're worthless, all that stuff. You work for
Jesus.
corporate MSNBC Light. The usual stuff that you get on Twitter, of
Mhm.
course. But I wanted to hear more about your. I wanted you to give
Sure.
us the facts, the historical
Yeah.
importance.
Well, you're right about so the police in their incarnation in the United States came out of the South when slavery was still around. These were slave catchers. It might be an ugly term that pisses people off, but that's just what they were there for. It was to find escaped slaves and bring them back to the people who owned them, in theory. So that sets a tone. It's true that the police evolved obviously after that. And I mean, to the people who say police do some good, I think that's usually in spite of what their purpose is, which remains the control of marginalized people, and the control of especially working class and poor people, especially people of color. As far as from a labor perspective, I've written a lot about police unions, and it's always controversial. But
Oh
police
yeah.
unions only, yeah, they only came into being. I can't remember the year. It was not that long ago. A few decades ago. It was very controversial when the first police union formed, and ever since they've, the relationship between them and the labor movement more broadly is really mixed, right? So as you mentioned, I think in when you brought this up, is that in the history of the U.S. labor movement, police have always been, where do you find them? You find them on the opposite side of working class people. You find them breaking strikes, arresting people, stopping any action from happening, all of that, right? Killing workers. So that was the reason that when they tried to unionize themselves, a lot of people in a more militant labor movement said, you're the class enemy. You work for the boss. You're there to protect capital. You're there to beat the shit out of us and kill us and put us in prison, which is what police have always done to striking workers in this country. And it's weird that gradually, as the U.S. labor movement declined in its militancy and capital got more and more power, police unions were sort of just kind of accepted now. So a lot of them are in the AFL-CIO, which is the main conglomerate of unions in this country. What I've written about is that the irony here is that the biggest police unions actually neither call themselves unions in the name, nor are they affiliated with the AFL-CIO. They often, will call themselves fraternal orders. It's like this throwback kind of creepy term, right? And when you look at what they actually fight for, it is so clearly in conflict with the interests of anyone. So every police union in this country constantly fights for things like they call them a police bill of rights, which I think is very insulting. So they want to be a protected class in certain places and have any crime against them considered a hate crime. Other things they fight for include, if someone who's a police officer kills someone, he should have more time before he's interviewed by anyone, which I think is just a very obvious, violation of basic principles of how we deal with the police and murder. I think it's the opposite of what we need right now, where we see that police killings are done all the time with no consequences. So it's stuff like that, where it's constantly asking for more and more protections between them and other working class people. And then when they won't call themselves unions and you find them outside of every strike, you find them arresting workers. To me, it's not controversial to say that a healthy anti-racist labor movement is going to eventually have to confront the question of, the police are our enemies. I mean, this came to a head during the Black Lives Matter movement, where you constantly had, people of color who were working class making these arguments, being arrested by cops, and having to really confront the idea that, like, maybe the Occupy slogan that they're just workers too and that they're part of the 99% is actually totally bullshit. So
Yeah, I mean, but what you're referring to, by the way, that congressional members have already decided to make assaulting a police officer a federal hate crime. My understanding is that there was a Protect and Serve Act that the legislation added a new section to Chapter 7, Title 18, that makes it a federal crime to knowingly cause bodily injury to any person or attempt to do so because of the actual or perceived status of a person as a law enforcement officer. And so it has additional penalties. You get 10 years of imprisonment for a violation or up to life sentences in cases that result in death or involve kidnapping. They are very successful, which is interesting because they seem to be one of the only labor unions, if we're not even calling it that, but it seems to be one of the only unions that is successful and continues to be more and more successful. Obviously, one of the most damaging impacts of police unions, or the fraternity of police, and I've talked about this a lot as well, is reinstating police officers that get charged with racial profiling or even use of use of deadly or violent force, they usually police unions work double time and to make sure that those officers are reinstated at other precincts. Those officers oftentimes then continue to cause harm in the communities that they're supposed to protect and serve. So that's another interesting tidbit from that angle as well. It's just like no one is equal. No one is more equal in front of the law than police officers here in America.
Yeah, I mean, they're immune to the law. I
Yeah.
mean, it's really, I'm sure you're well aware of this, but like, yeah, I don't know. I spent a lot of time doing anti-police brutality organizing and seeing the most obvious cases of police murder and hope, there's mass outrage. We have Ferguson, we have all these things. And time and again, a year goes by, right? Because that's how long it ends up taking to get some police officer into an actual trial, if you can get them into a trial. These people keep getting off completely free of consequence, right? And in the meantime, they become martyrs and heroes for the far right. They inflame the racism in this country. And so to me, it's like these people need to be subject to the law because they're not. They don't need more exclusions from that law.
Yeah, which is interesting. You mentioned the far right as well. Like that's something I never understood because the far right in America, in American history at least, has always been very anti-government. They're usually like minarchists or some weird form of like Americanized version of libertarians, and oftentimes the kinds of like white supremacist or far right activism that turns into terror in America was usually, or at least according to the Southern Poverty Law Center, not necessarily because of white supremacy or anything like that, but historically has been about anti-government. And now they love a police state. It seems like they love a police state because the police state will continue to enforce some form of supremacy upon marginalized people. So they're like, it's fine. It's fine if white people are also in the crosshairs. And the reason why I mention this is because like working class white people or poor white people are still killed in the hands of the police. There are more white people in this country, maybe not at the same rate as black people, definitely not at the same rate as people of color, but still more white people are killed in the hands of the police than any other race. So this isn't an issue about black or white, even though a lot of people in the far right assume that it is. This is an issue that impacts all Americans. And for some reason, it's just impossible to get any sort of leeway on this because we constantly deflect away whenever Black Lives Matter protesters or anyone for that matter decides to take a stance against police brutality of all things. They are deemed unpatriotic. And I think there's an element of that which ties along to like the post 9/11 era of hyper patriotism and exploiting patriotism and like turning and conflating troops with the troops here, which are now police officers. And obviously that's really dangerous as well. I don't know. I just what do you think we can do about it? Like, is there any way to curb back the?
Can I solve the problem of
Yes, can you solve police violence right now, please, on this stream?
Well, I mean, I think what you point out is really important, right? So and I think this is something that a lot of just sort of mainstream liberal media really has problems grappling with when it comes to the far right. So they consider that this is an issue about race. I'm talking about the far right, the people who have the Blue Lives Matters flags or fucking tattoos on them and shit. They think that this is an issue of patriotism, that actually people of color are not real Americans, that when you talk about these are the troops at home when we're talking about cops, I mean, what's implied is that they're an occupying force, and the people whose communities are most affected are not actually, are sort of this war from within, putting siege to our country, things like that. So I think all of that is really important. And then what you say, I mean, you're right. The majority of people killed, I'm pretty sure the majority of people killed by the police in this country are white, because of the makeup of the country.
It's not the majority. I believe it's
It's not the majority.
I believe it's 40%. I'm not exactly sure on the latest data, but I remember looking at it recently and it was around 40%. It's still lower. Like, it's a disproportionate amount. It's much lower than the amount, like 40% overall in a country where I think 69% is still considered white. So So it's
Yes.
still a much higher number than the overall the number than like the amount of black people that are killed in the hands of the police, but you know, the rate is lower.
Right. But I mean, I bring it up just to say that your point is valid. That actually this is, even though I'm not one to shy away from, I think we should foreground racism and anti-racism when we talk about how to fix things like police brutality. But that said, it is very much a poor and working class person issue. Those are the people who are actually getting killed by cops, first and foremost, even if it's going to overwhelmingly be black and brown communities. And then the fact, so having established that, the fact that people on the far right see this as a only black person issue, something like that, has no corresponding reality. You know, it doesn't have any correspondence with reality. And yet, you know, it's really interesting to see mainstream media try to grapple with that, right? So we know that, I mean, we all make fun of how mainstream liberal outlets try to fact check Trump as if that's how well, he's so off from reality. We just have to show that he's lying. We're going to give him 10 Pinocchios in this fucking PolitiFact article, shit like that. It doesn't matter because this is about ideology. And actually, I think this is something liberalism really can't deal with, is how do you grapple with something, a phenomenon that is driven by ideology and not by facts, right? And so I think liberalism just thinks if you can correct people and you can explain to them that, oh, actually a lot of white people are killed by police and you should be concerned about this, that's going to somehow work. But the rage here is not about the issue, it's about black people. And so there's no way to fix that, to get them to care about police brutality when really they only care about this issue because they're racist. So it's, you know, I think that is a basic thing to understand, is that there are people who are actually racist and are driven by those beliefs. And the question of what to do with them is an open one, but to pretend that you can sort of convince them that they should see this issue in a different light, quite often for people on the far right, is just you're buying into their bullshit.
No, I mean, I was referring more so to the Americans in the margins who are inundated by like propaganda that they see on Fox News, but they don't necessarily have any sort of, like, they don't have ideological like an ideological reason for why they back police officers, but just specifically what they've been trained to think. I still believe that, you know, there's an overwhelming majority of Americans who are apolitical, who don't necessarily care about this sort of stuff, who assume that, you know, they've seen the stereotypes on TV of people of color, and they assume that the police are still there to protect them against that onslaught whenever that may happen. And that's usually, or for me at least, that's usually why I talk about the fact that, you know, white people are also killed in the hands of the police, and that this is a problem impacting all Americans. But the other thing I was going to say.
I agree with you on that. The people who are the most vocal about this kind of Blue Lives Matter stuff, who hate black people who protest, those are the people I'm talking about. And I really don't think, I agree with you. I also think it's really important to reach the vast majority of Americans who actually, plenty of people of color included in this, that generally view the police as there to assist the community, and who, you know, might have certain grudges against people who, like ourselves, who might talk bad about the police. But I think those are two very separate groups of people.
Yeah, and ultimately, even those who understand that police officers are hurting white people as well, a lot of times they come at it from a perspective that as long as I can still maintain some form of supremacy, or as long as if I see a black person walking in the wrong neighborhood, I can still rely on the police officers to get there and get rid of this nuisance. And that's why I feel like this is a multifaceted conversation, obviously, or multifaceted problem. And that's why it's important to also look at the regular daily interactions that police have with citizens, black citizens, brown citizens, white citizens, even when they enforce this sort of authority upon people and assume that it's all justified. That's where that violence oftentimes starts, and that's usually the most common interaction that police officers have with citizens, is when they just like routinely detain people for no reason whatsoever. and then it extends that justification at that lower level or at those low impact arrests extends all the way to justifying violent murders. And it's still an ongoing issue here, obviously, in America. Anyway, let's not talk about the police anymore. I didn't. What else? What else are you looking? What are you looking forward to in the future of the labor movement in America? Is there a big labor momentum? We don't really hear about it because obviously the most important thing that's happening in the country is Paul Manafort answering for his crimes that no one else, only Paul Manafort has committed. No one else in this country, no international lobbyists have ever done the identical things that Paul Manafort has done. That's more important. Stormy Daniels more important. But what do you think about the labor movement?
I know. I mean, to your point, it's fucking. I mean, I'm still pretty new to writing. For writing as much as I do, and it's really funny to go through the process of having to justify why a labor story or a social movement story is news, when there's about if I wrote about Stormy Daniels or White House intrigue, it would just be. No, I wouldn't have to explain myself, right? Any publication is willing to just run endless details about whatever fucking comment you can get. So that's a media problem that is coming very close to home now that I'm experiencing it all the time. That said, things to look forward to. So I wrote something for NBC today that was sort of taking stock of the labor movement of the past year and things to look forward to. I would say the teachers are still kind of this exciting thing. I think it's hard for people to understand that strike activity like this, especially in the public sector, can have a huge domino effect on other working class people, especially when it's someone who is, teachers are really likable figures. They're the center of their community, especially in poor communities. They're often the person that is there that has resources. Schools are the only public spaces in a lot of these places. And so in that sense, it actually has a huge amount of potential to really change things. So that is exciting. I just, as you might know, just wrote a huge story about this huge contract negotiation going on with UPS workers. So yeah, that's the people in that union contract, the drivers who drop off your packages all day, who drop off your games. Sorry, I should be specific. That you ordered.
No one orders games via UPS. It's delivered over the internet. You're wrong. Get your facts straight. Now I'm thinking, what else are you wrong about? Are you wrong about everything?
I'm gonna write an article about game developers unionizing just so I can get screamed at by every person on the internet for getting some fucking super minor detail wrong.
Yeah, well, joke's on you because we here are all pro-communism because of CD Projekt Red, which is in Poland, and because they've nationalized parts of their industry, or I guess they've nationalized gaming in some respects. They're able to hunker down and they're able to hunker down and create these very comprehensive universes that take over 7+ years to develop, rather than disgusting capitalist dogs over at Activision who keep creating that same stupid Call of Duty franchise over and over again, and or EA that steals from honorable gamers by making multiple DLCs, by selling half completed games and then forcing you to pay more and more for the same game that you normally should have gotten for that original $60 price. So everyone here will be in. What?
I'm trying to think of where in my life I went wrong that I'm constantly talking to people who want to explain to me the differences between gaming companies and shit.
Yeah, well, sorry that we're passionate about what what career choices we've taken. As you can see, even with Chapo, like Felix is not giving 100% over at the podcast side and now giving 200% over at the Twitch stream side. It's just, that's the kind of thing. Gaming takes over our lives.
Guys I had in mind as holy shit, what have I done with my life? I went to their fucking gaming debate for some masochistic reason. It was actually fun, but I think I've hit my limit of how much I can understand gaming unless I actually game. So,
You're too
All due
busy.
respect.
You're too busy writing pieces about the labor unions and whatnot.
Yes.
Um,
Right.
Wait, there was another thing that I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what kind of future you envision with as like Price Waterhouse Cooper would call it, Industry 4.0, artificial intelligence and full automation. What does that what does that mean for labor unions as a whole? Do you have any opinion on that? I know it's like a long,
Yeah.
long question,
Yeah.
but
It is a big question. But I mean, the short answer is there's nothing wrong with technology, right? I mean, of course not. There's nothing inherent in it, but it's about who controls technology and who controls how it's implemented into workplaces. So, in that sense, everyone is quite right to be really concerned about technology, about AI and automation right now, because working class people have very little control. Our unions are really weak. A bunch of unions are constantly in fights about how to implement new technology, and they're regularly losing those fights. So obviously, say a workplace has, I mean, so you say CVS had a union, right? And everybody knows the self-checkout machines. Now, if they had a strong union, they could say, okay, we can implement that, but you cannot lay off any workers. You're going to find other jobs for these workers, or you're going to retrain people, or you're going to expand in some way so that you're not firing people over this technology. But because CVS workers do not have a union, instead they just are fired or laid off eventually, right? So that's why there's a concern. So, as far as what my vision of the future is, well, my vision of the future is that working class people have the power to actually use technology so that we can work less instead of being laid off and having no jobs, right? So, I mean, I think it was Keynes that had this quote about his vision of the future in America, that there would be, everyone would be working 4-hour days, 4 days a week by, I forget what the year was. And he was right that the technology would exist for that. What he was not right about was that the working class would have the power to force that. And so we haven't done it. We could, but we haven't done it. And so, it's a fight. I think everybody should be fighting. I'm of the super lazy variety, so I think the people on the left should be arguing for less work, that we have enough technology to go around where we should just be reducing the work week so that people can work less hours without losing jobs, so that there's more jobs for everyone to go around, and that people can actually enjoy their lives for a change, right? So that's what technology should be used for. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I mean, I'm certainly doing what I can to try to make that happen. And I think a lot of people in the labor movement certainly are. So open question about technology, but cautiously for it.
yeah, no, I full hard agree with everything you said about it. I mean, except like I said, I've mentioned this before, except for gamers, because we never stop. It's a 24/7 thing. I mean, I didn't ask for this. It was kind of, I had. It's like Batman, basically. Like I'm not the hero that people deserve, but the hero that they need. So I'm just gonna fulfill that role. But as far as everyone else goes, I get it. I think in a weird way, here in America, we have this weird capitalist culture where everyone assumes that like it's disgusting to request time off or to even want paid vacation or to take paid leave on any given in any given industry. They find that to be weak for some weird reason, and like this is a conversation I have with libertarians all the time too. And I ask them like, look, what's the purpose of technology if we can't collectively benefit from it? Is technology only there so that a few people can make more money and improve the efficiency of their own output, but not necessarily redistribute resources in an equitable way? Like how will that work in a what?
What do they say to you when you ask about that?
No, they say that technology is specifically so that we can improve efficiency. It's not.
Okay.
I mean, it's almost like a Nazi perspective on it, and it's understandable because like it's that weak die, the weak die and the strong survive mentality that a lot of people have, a lot of libertarians
Right.
have at least, which doesn't really correspond to when you ask them what happens with tremendous power and influence and how will economic inequality survive. I mean, what will happen to our already growing rate of economic inequality here in America under a libertarian leadership, and they're like, well, philanthropy is a thing. So like, on the one hand, they believe in essentially killing the poor, but on the other hand, they're like, well, the really rich will help them out of the goodness of their hearts. So obviously, it's bullshit. But
I mean, it's amazing that they can look around the world and think that that's true. Like when people starve all the time, that somehow someone's going to come around to being generous and righteous and actually protect strangers from living terrible lives when like there's just no evidence that the rich do that. If they did, they wouldn't have gotten so rich. So
yeah. Well, I mean,
props to you for debating libertarian. It's so not grounded in reality that I get mad. I can't do it.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but according to Charlie Kirk, socialism killed 100 million people, and that's exactly what Bernie Sanders is pushing for. So owned. Yeah. I mean, it's lazy, but it works. What?
So, are you all in for Sanders? What's your politics on this?
Personally, yeah, 100%. The reason why Bernie Sanders is so popular is because he's not even pushing any sort of radical change. He's actually trying to implement some sock them policies in America that we have found out very quickly are incredibly popular, because that's real populism, not what fucking Donald Trump was doing. That's actual populism, and it's working. So of course I'm in favor of it, because I believe in like democratic revolutions. I mean, obviously, with the rate that with the way things are currently going, I also think that it's inevitable if unless barring a drastic change, we're going to have a violent revolution ultimately. Like, that's gonna happen. It's ridiculous to assume that it won't happen. But people like Bernie Sanders are important because not only do they postpone that, but also could potentially solve that. I think it's like marginal improvements that allow people to understand here in America that change is possible. That we could have some socialist institutions. Obviously, nothing can be like purely socialist under a capitalist society, but like universal healthcare is a good place to start, in my opinion, given the fact that it's incredibly popular. And a year ago or 2 years ago, before Bernie Sanders, like, people weren't talking about universal healthcare in the same light. It didn't have an 80% approval rating. It didn't have 52% of Republicans actually in favor of it. The only reason why people are in favor of it is because someone like Bernie Sanders came out and started talking about socialism and started talking about universal healthcare and how things could be better. I mean, obviously there were other politicians in the past in America that have also advocated for similar things, if not more radical things. But right now, Bernie Sanders is my guy, because he is in some respects pushing the envelope, and I think that's important. I'm not one of those people who's like, it doesn't matter, he's also a capitalist, fuck him.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think you're totally right. That it's totally perplexing to be a socialist now compared to what this was like 5 years ago, 2 years ago. It's completely changed the landscape, and a huge part of it is the Sanders campaign. Personally, I've been I don't write about electoral politics, and there's a critique, implicit in that, of the focus on it all the time. But that said, like, when I see someone like Sanders actually pushing things, like he's starting fights with Amazon now, Disney, all these things where they're actually being pressured by name and putting out statements and trying to fight this battle before he like sanctions them with having to raise wages, with having to provide more care for workers. I mean, that shit helps regardless of whether you think you're to the left of Sanders or not. So, in that sense, I'm similarly kind of just like, yeah, Bernie, keep pushing it, do it.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, have we had, like, Ralph Nader was great and all, but like, have we had a politician who's been this effective in electoral politics while also being able to lead like genuine Democratic Party resistance efforts on the one hand, and push the party altogether to the left in this meaningful way. I mean, look, I don't know what the outcomes are going to look like yet. It's terrifying. I mean, the the DNC Unity Commission has done great work. Like Nomi over there was a part of that movement as well. Like they abolished super delegates, or at least like significantly curbed them back, which was important. But then they also took away caucuses. So I don't know what that's going to look like. But like these are important changes that ultimately will make the Democratic Party more democratic and hopefully push it further to the left. I am hopeful. I mean, usually I'm really skeptical, but when it comes to Bernie Sanders, at least I'm hopeful. All I want him to do is get on TRT so he can get a little bit more jacked, so his head doesn't look like a massive bowling ball weighing down his entire upper body. Because that shit is important. Unfortunately, optics is important, and he looks very old. It does. I love him. I love him, but
no, I am concerned about his age. I mean, he is. I can't imagine how that's gonna work. He's so fucking old.
He's not though. But that's the thing. He's not. He's only 76 years old. He's only 2 years older than Donald Trump. Or how much older is he than Donald Trump? Like this will.
I don't know.
No, he okay, I'm going to tell you right now exactly how old Bernie...
I think he would be the oldest president ever elected.
Bernie Sanders is currently 76 years old, okay? Donald Trump is 72 years old. He's 4 years older than... Yeah, he'd be the oldest president, but, like, he's fucking only 4 years older. But you wouldn't imagine that. He looks like he's 10 years or 20 years older than Donald Trump. And that's what I'm saying.
You want to put him on the treadmill, give him some supplements...
Just give him steroids. Like, honestly, it's ridiculous. Like, I mean, don't get me started about PEDs here. It's just, I have some different opinions on performance-enhancing drugs. I think politicians should use them. I think athletes should use them. But Bernie Sanders on testosterone replacement therapy could look, it was Russian propaganda. Like, even the Russians were like, man, this Bernie guy has some good ideas, but if only we put him in a sexy body and wear like a skimpy bathing suit. Do you guys not remember that? Hold on, I'm going to show that to everyone right now. Like, for those of you who are unfamiliar, let me show you Sexy Bernie really quickly. If you don't remember that, this was like one of the ways in which Russia influenced the outcome of our election. Because that's all you need to know about.
Book?
What?
It was like a coloring book of like hot Sanders. Yeah. Yes,
thick fucking Sanders, dude. It's so awesome. Like, hold on, let me see. Here, for those of you who can't see, this is it. This is what the Russians used to influence the
oh my god.
The election. And honestly, like, I'm not saying I'm getting that from the Russians, but I do think that it would work. If we had Bernie Sanders like put on some fucking muscle mass, I don't know. This is now turning into the Joe Rogan podcast, but
right. We were talking about the labor movement. Now we're just discussing Bernie's body and how to make it better. Which
you're gonna get this here, okay? That's gonna happen at some point. I'm gonna talk about the male physique. But see, Gulsifer says that's why he voted for him.
That's where my vote hangs. Is you gotta have a push-up contest between Trump and Bernie and Biden, and then whoever wins.
Oh my God, Biden's gonna win though, for sure.
Oh my God.
Biden.
Yeah.
So that's like okay, so that's interesting. I wanted to keep this exclusively labor related, but now that you're talking about Biden and whatnot, even though you say you don't like cover electoral politics, like Joe Biden is a terrible person that you could ever put up against Donald Trump. It's like Hillary Clinton, but a man.
Yeah.
Essentially.
I mean, at Jacobin, we ran, I think, we did this in the past couple weeks. We ran, I think, a 5-part series about how bad Joe Biden is. It was just like, let's get it out now, because if this ends up being a real issue, we already have our material to just constantly criticize him. I mean, he's proudly done the most kind of right-wing version of liberalism, which in this country is deeply conservative, right, by any international standards. So yeah, he is not a he's barely a liberal. He's certainly not a progressive, and you know, to anybody who's really on the left, he is gonna be a fucking disaster. Also, is just like a weird character. I don't know. People think he's lovable. I don't.
Yeah, he's not. He's weird as fuck, and he also he gropes people. Like there are entire video compilations on Joe Biden groping people. The Secret Service literally call him Creepy Biden. Like I know this from firsthand information from people who have worked in the Secret Service who are on his detail. They call him Creepy Joe Biden. The reason why they call him that is because he loves to grope people. He loves to grope women, no matter what their ages are. Like in the aftermath of the Me Too movement, like there's no way he would be fucking destroyed instantly. Creepy Joe, that's what they call you, Creepy Joe. Donald Trump would say that 3 times over, and then it's a wrap.
True.
That's all Fox News would run on.
Like the absolute worst person you can have. Also, like he's just not offering anything that actually fixes the stuff that either Trump has created or made worse. So
look at this. Here, I'm gonna pull it up right now. Look at this compilation of Joe Biden being creepy. New version, Joe Biden being creepy.
Drop your hands. That to somebody in North Dakota, they think it's a frisk. Drop your hands to the side, you know. They think you're in trouble, right?
It's just so bad.
I have no doubt about it. I'm heading up to Capitol Hill now to swear in.
Right, these videos would get a lot of views real quick.
It already has 2 million views.
Members of the United States Senate.
Look, this is one of the classic ones. Look at this. Look at this.
Today is a really special day.
Thanks to give out here.
He just fucking smelled her hair.
Are you kidding me?
What the fuck? No, you can't. I mean, I'm just saying, like, this, even from a liberal perspective, this is completely unacceptable. And the fact that the DNC keeps playing around with the idea that Joe Biden could be a great candidate for the establishment Democrats is absolutely preposterous. It's so weird. I mean, they don't give a shit about anything, obviously. But the thing that pisses me off, at least, even from a pragmatic point of view, is that they don't care about winning either. They just care about staying in office and having a position of power, even if they are the controlled opposition party. Like, that's what's really frustrating to me about the current DNC or the current Democratic establishment, at least, is that they'll make these terrible decisions and put Joe Biden in a position of power when fucking YouTube compilations and Jacobin are already taking him down, apparently, even though people are saying Jacobin is CIA. Alex, are you familiar with this?
I'm familiar with the accusation, which is insane because I get paid such shit money that I'd have a real issue if we were actually being subsidized by the CIA. Yeah, I mean, that's a classic. The thing a lot of people who just see this stuff on the internet don't know is this is a classic thing that like tore the left apart in the 60s. It's like everybody accusing each other of being CIA, and then the actual people who were CIA just fucking loved it, right? So they just, encouraged all of it. So my personal view is you don't dignify that with a serious response because it's just dumb shit.
So what is it? Is it the Stalinists that always advance this agenda? Is that what it is? Like, because there's always going to be someone who's more extreme than you to the left of you. You know what I mean? And for some reason, there's always, see, people. I don't trust Jacobin. Like, people are already saying dumb shit on the chat. It's just.
I know.
Yeah, it's immediately.
So I mean, the best, like, most charitable version I can give is, and also, I mean, just to clarify, I don't think Stalinists are to the left of me. I actually think if you're a real Stalinist, that's some conservative nonsense, and you should probably change your politics. That said, I think the theory came from the fact that, like, it's really well designed, and everybody's really, the guy who started it, Bhaskar Sankara, started it when he was like 20 or 21 out of his college dorm room. And the fact that it succeeded, I think, makes people very suspicious, which is really telling as far as people's understanding of what regular people can actually accomplish, that you don't think a magazine could succeed unless it was funded by the CIA. That's kind of insane. So I think it's the graphic design is the root of the conflict, to be honest. It's just like really pretty. And so people are really mad about it.
Yeah, I mean, look at another leftist, supposedly leftist publication like the New Republic, and you'll see their design is good too. CIA confirmed. Never mind. I'm not listening to any other alternatives here. CIA confirmed.
Yeah, it's fine.
But oh my God, people are advancing criticisms towards Jacobin here. But I think it's important.
Online. No
What?
To you. I said those things are. It's surprising how prevalent those criticisms are on like Twitter, when just in actual organizing spaces generally, I never encounter those criticisms. So, I take them with a grain of salt.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds like something a CIA operative would say, but
It's true.
I'm just kidding.
That's the thing.
Everybody, this is I know, but I just want to clarify for everyone on the chat. Obviously, I'm joking, and also Jacobin and other leftist publications are incredibly important, and you should support them. They have a really cool podcast too. Right? What is it called? I forget. I listen to it sometimes.
Yeah, we host a few of them. I think you're probably thinking of Dan Denver's, which is the Dig Radio. He has really good guests. So yes. Yeah, we're a nonprofit. We make no money. We just make money off of. Despite, in addition to the CIA money, all our money is just subscribers. So
yeah, of course.
So we're
couple things that before you go, just quickly, I'm gonna ask you what your thoughts are on a couple things that happened, like really quickly. Specifically, Donald Trump's statements today about union organizing on Labor Day. What did he say? He said that he slammed the union leaders who criticized them on Labor Day. What do you have to say about that? I don't know if you.
My short answer is that I am certainly no defender of people like Richard Trumka, who is the president of the AFL-CIO and a fucking classic union bureaucrat. But Trump, you mentioned this, it's fake populism. The same week that he says this stuff, where he's looking out for the American worker, he has cut funding to so many things that people rely upon. He has pushed the most anti-worker Supreme Court nominee in a very long time. That judge who's about to be confirmed or may have been confirmed today or yesterday, just like egregiously anti-union. Everything Trump does is anti-union. And so that kind of shit, it's hard not to get mad about it. Also, there's an implicit white supremacist thing of he cares about white working people, because obviously he wouldn't be, if he saw the immigrants he's deporting as workers, if he saw black people as workers, he would not be able to say that he looks out for workers. So that shit is just, the absolute most misleading, infuriating stuff. So now whenever I write about the labor movement, I include a line about Donald Trump being bullshit about working class people. Because, as soon as the thing I wrote for NBC went up today, I go look at Twitter and it's like 3 tweets from Trump about how much he loves working people. And I was like, oh my God, fuck this guy.
Yeah,
So,
that's
thoughts.
actually uniquely important now, though, because, and that kind of segues into the second thing I was going to say, which is we heard Tucker Carlson talk about this earlier this week. I'm sure you saw the video where Tucker Carlson was referring to Amazon, probably one of the most prominent voices in American politics that's speaking about this outside of like Bernie Sanders and the left. Tucker Carlson talking about Amazon's poor treatment of workers. And that struck me as odd originally, but it's very obvious what they are doing. And just like Steve Bannon recently talked about that as well with the interview that Noah Colvin conducted for the New Yorker. I don't know if you read that one, but where he was talking about how he was like, there's two. Oh, you don't read New Yorker out of principle because of what's going on, because they're headlining Steve Bannon as their main speaker on the main stage.
I'm boycotting Noah, actually. It has nothing to do with Steve Bannon.
Oh, you're boycotting Noah? I'm boycotting Noah as well because he doesn't game anymore. It's kind of bullshit. But anyway.
So what did Steve Bannon say?
But Steve Bannon was talking about how there's 2 kinds of socialism in America. The socialism for the wealthy, which are bank bailouts and all this other kind of subsidies. And then the socialism for the very poor. And that's an interesting populist message to take, especially someone like Steve Bannon, who's a rigid capitalist, or at least was a blue dog Democrat back in the JFK days. The reason why he's taking that, I personally believe, and the reason why Tucker Carlson's talking about that, I personally believe, is because the right is very good at capturing trends, because they understand that they're in the moral minority, so they'll do whatever they can to sell their perspective. And right now, they're using economic populism, specifically for the white working class, as you mentioned, as a way to captivate a larger audience. And I feel like if Democrats don't take note of that, or even performatively start talking about the protecting workers, we are going to keep getting whipped up and down by Republicans across the ballot.
Yeah. I mean, we saw that with Trump, right? That was his campaign, is you present Hillary as the most elite figure, and you pretend that you are not also of that, right? Even though everything you do, both as a person and as a political actor, in the case of Trump or any of the other people you're talking about, Carlson, Bannon, everything they do is anti-worker. So it's a move that's rhetorical. It's not about actually having any sympathy with these people. And not to be like, to go to the most extreme, but this is also not unprecedented. It's a really toxic mix, because the obvious example that springs to mind
Nazis
is how Nazism developed, right? Which was a sort of real, for white people that were poor, a concern for them, that then very quickly translated into how do we kill the left, quite literally, and how do we pretend to take their place as actually looking out for working people. Well, now we have a similar situation where these people are, as they undermine every institution that working class people rely upon, whether it's food stamps, whether it's healthcare, whether it's anything of these sorts, they undermine that with one hand, and the other they sort of adopt this sort of faux white supremacist pro-worker thinking. So all I would say is it's very dangerous, and these people are not dumb. And it's hard not to get really, really mad at things like mainstream liberalism for putting us in a position where that was a viable strategy for them and it would be believable. But when you have liberalism unable to pretend, they can't, with real believability, they can't claim that they care about working class people. And so, you open yourself up for this stuff. And fortunately, what we have is a growing left that actually can speak to those issues. And when you see those videos, it sort of puts a fire under your ass about like how pressing this stuff really is. Because, hey, if you're a poor person and you're watching Tucker Carlson, he might be the first big figure on a TV you've seen that has ever addressed something that actually really matters to you in this basic way, right? Your work is your life, and you're poor and you're struggling, and probably you're white and you wonder, what am I supposed to do? And here is this figure, pretending that he cares. So, it just makes me hate liberalism a lot for giving them something so easy to do and that we know has such toxic results. So, yeah, it's scary.
Yeah. So yeah, all right. Final question. Like I said before, but this time not as pessimistic. So what do you think about the future of the Democratic Party then, in the upcoming midterms, and then potentially? I keep asking you electoral politics. I apologize.
I know. I have no thoughts that I'm gonna give about the future of the Democratic Party. I think they'll probably, I think they're gonna do well in the midterms. I have no idea who they're actually gonna run in 2020, and I think a lot hinges on what they end up choosing. So making predictions on that, to me, doesn't make any sense. That said, I think the crop of left-wing candidates is exciting. And I think, people like me are going to keep doing what we're doing, which is, hope that they support us, hope that they push policies that help working class people, but never rely on it, right? Never get any kind of loyalty to any politician, because, their power rests in even the best of presidents, even the best leader. Even if it was Sanders who was president, he could only do so much unless he had mass movements, strong unions, people that were unafraid to challenge him on certain things and push him and be a kind of visible thing that he could go to Congress and say, look at all the public pressure. This is why I'm pushing this progressive policy, whatever it might be. So regardless, it's always the same as far as what we need to do. I hope the Democrats do well. I wish them the best of luck. But yeah, not holding my breath.
I feel you on that. All right, what do you want to plug?
What do I want to plug? Well, I don't think people should follow me on Twitter, Alex N Press. You should read my writing, which I'm doing a whole bunch of these days, all over the place. Other than that, I don't really need to plug anything. The haters of Jacobin do not need to read Jacobin. So that's that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, everyone should read Jacobin. It's great.
You should link the thing that I wrote today for NBC.
I just linked your Instagram a bunch of times. Let me see. Found your tweets. Trash. It's not for NBC News. Oh yeah. Unions are dying. Damn. Oh, with Micah Utrish. Okay. There you go. Please refrain from spam warning. My moderators are yelling at me for spamming my own chat. Anyway, all right, everybody go follow Alex. And Alex, thank you so much for joining us. It was awesome. I hope that, we struggled together. We got over some hurdles here, some technological hurdles. But
this is what I said to you is you're my low pressure person that I can figure out how any of these things work with. So I'm glad I now know how to do it.
Yeah, now that you've tested out doing these sort of things with me, you can go and do all of your other media opportunities, hopefully.
Yeah, now you're going to find me on MSNBC.
I was just going to say, yeah, now you're going to go on Joyanne Reed's show and talk about labor unions because she's going to care about that. But,
Me and Rachel Maddow are just going to talk about Russia. You're going to be very confused about what happened to me.
Well, I won't be because Jacobin is